All right, everybody. Well, what do you know? I thought everything was set up.
Guess not. I'll have to check that out later. I think maybe I was supposed to. I think the music is uploaded, but I was supposed to manually add it myself, and I didn't. Sorry about that. Wow, I didn't even get the listening to Blog Talk Radio thing. I don't know what the hell happened there, but anyway, still got a few things to iron out. But to worry about what happened yesterday, I figured out what happened. Jeez, Murphy. I thought the show ended because, well, it's a long story, but I thought I was logged in through Skype, but no, I had actually logged in through Blog Talk's webpage. And then all of a sudden, Skype went dead on me. I heard that hang-up sound. So I thought I was cut off. And I didn't see any option to try to sign back in. I'm like, what the hell? It's a good thing, usually I'm talking to myself when that happens, like, son of a blank, And I'm glad I didn't do that. That wouldn't have sounded good coming over the air. But I guess for quite a few minutes, I was still on air and didn't realize it, and I'm typing away, and, oh well, I didn't get cut off after all. I could have finished the show yesterday. So anyway, sorry about that. A little confusion. I know exactly what went wrong, and make sure that doesn't happen again. Anyway, before I finish off with the discussion yesterday on the origins of human sacrifice in the Maya and Olmec Aztec cultures, pretty interesting. I first wanted to read this. A listener had sent me this last night. It's pretty funny in a pathetic sort of way, but funny nonetheless. It says, you may be confused about why we are bombing Iraq and Syria. So we will make ourselves very clear. We support the Iraqi government in the fight against ISIS. We don't like ISIS, but ISIS has been supported by Saudi Arabia, whom we do like, and Saudi Arabia is now supporting us in bombing ISIS. We don't like President Assad in Syria. We support the fight against him, but not ISIS, which is also fighting against him. We don't like him, but Iran supports the Iraqi government against ISIS. We don't like President Assad in Syria. We support the fight against him, but not ISIS, which is also fighting against him. We don't like Iran, but Iran supports the Iraqi government against ISIS. So some of our friends support our enemies, and some of our enemies are our friends, and some of our enemies are fighting against our enemies, who we want to lose, but we don't want our enemies who are fighting our enemies to win. If the people we want to defeat are defeated, they might be replaced by people we like even less. And all this was started by us invading Iraq to drive out terrorists who weren't there in the first place until we went there to drive them out. So we hope you now understand. And that's pretty good, pretty damn good summation. That about adequately sums it up, wouldn't you say? What absolute mindless. It actually does make total sense if you really sit back and think about this seemingly contradictory policy of ours. Makes complete and total sense. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not speaking facetiously. Our foreign policy in the Middle East makes total sense once you understand who it is, who is, has been, and unfortunately probably always will be in control of our foreign policy. It makes total sense now, doesn't it? When you have schizophrenic scum running your country, what else can you expect but schizophrenic scumbag policies? It makes total sense, I just had another page or so of points. But absolutely fascinating, isn't it? You look at all the weight of evidence, and there's a great weight of evidence. Let me remind you, we have the Los Loomis Decalogue stone in New Mexico. We have the Hebrew inscription stones that have been pulled out of Hopewell mounds in Ohio. Got the Bat Creek Cave stone, which was displayed for years in the Smithsonian upside down, so nobody recognized what it was until Cyrus Gordon, a world-renowned epigrapher, was thumbing through the Smithsonian one day and realized what he was looking at. He turned it upside down, and sure enough, bang, what had eluded scholars for so long, he now translated, fluently translated it, because it was in fact a first century form of Hebrew, block Hebrew, I think it was called, the same type of Hebrew on the Los Loomis Decalogue stone. Anyway, then you've got, like I said yesterday, you look in the Popol Vuh, you've got a reference to what's clearly a slightly modified version of the story of the Tower of Babel. The ancients spoke one language, and then they angered the gods by building a tower, and so the gods, destroyed the tower, scattered the people, and confounded their language. The same frickin' story. It doesn't mention the word Babel, but all the details are there. So it's no surprise then that in that same document you'd see other references to the tribe. And then of course, the Aztecs talking about their god Yeotul as being the origin of human sacrifice, the originator. There's also another good example. Oh, by the way, they found 2 Star of David symbols at 2 different Mayan sites, by the way. But also, there's the famous phylactery stone. It's a Mayan jade plaque with a carving of a Mayan priest wearing phylacteries. Absolutely no question about it. They are wrapped around the palm and wrist and fingers in the exact same fashion that a rabbi would wear them. They're also around his forehead with a leather sack hanging from the guy's forehead, exactly the way phylacteries are worn. So much, in fact, and not only around the hand and wrist, by the way, but they're wrapped around the forearm as well in the same fashion as phylacteries. So much, so precisely much like the way phylacteries are tied, that it has rightly been called the phylactery stone. Of course, these great learned scholars would laugh if you suggested that that is in fact exactly what is being represented. Oh, no, we just called it that because it looks exactly like it, but there's no connection. The Hebrews weren't here. Shut up. The evidence is overwhelming, ladies and gentlemen, and 99.9% of the scholars out there know full well about this evidence. But they're not going to tell you about it. And they're going to laugh if you try to point it out and make that connection. Just like they know Columbus was not the one who discovered America. They know about at least, the Norse settlement in Newfoundland 500 years before the time of Columbus. They know about it, but they're not going to talk about it, and they're not going to reflect it in the history book. It's so freaking disgusting. You can't even get them to tell the truth about the ancient past. And people expect they're going to get the truth from them about what's going on today? Jesus Christ, man. I was in a chat room last night, and this idiot is on the mic. This is a Christian. I like to go there once in a while, and, if I have an upset stomach, I go in there to help induce vomiting. Anyway, so I'm in there listening, and this friggin' idiot gets up on the mic and he says,
That's a crazy conspiracy theory. Obama never said he was a Muslim.
Well, I just happened to have a video loaded with quotes from him, actual video clips of him talking during interviews, behind a podium addressing an obvious, predominantly Muslim crowd. And so, I shared the video with them. And I said, you know what, though? It really doesn't matter that he says he's a Muslim, because the truth is he could give a damn about Islam or Christianity. When he's in a Muslim audience, he says he's a Muslim. When he's in a predominantly Christian audience, he says he's a Christian. But I said, this is what all politicians do. You had Clinton shown coming out of church every frickin' Sunday with a Bible in hand. He loved those photo op sessions. And then Georgie Boy, after him, the same thing, talking about Jesus and how he received Jesus while walking on the beach with, frickin' Billy Graham. Something Billy Graham himself doesn't remember. But anyway, I pointed out, I said, this is what politicians do. So they can manipulate the gullible masses. They have always pretended to be fond of the popular religion, whatever crowd they're addressing, I said, it's just to manipulate and exploit the masses. But I said, do you know who plays this game even more effectively than politicians? Ministers. And then I got off the mic and left them to mull in that thought. Ah, man, I just marvel going into some of these chat rooms sometime and listen to these arses. Mindless freaking, man. You get more intelligence going to a pet shop. For God's sakes, man, people are so freaking stupid today. But anyway, back to our notes from yesterday that I had ended off with, the last quote that I had cited from that Aztec Codex there. Reference was made to, quote, little children as being offered as payment. Remember how we saw earlier that the great Yahya required the firstborn to be sacrificed. So here we have children, not just humans being sacrificed, but specifically a common practice was to sacrifice children of the captives, from war. Again, something Yahweh commanded. Kill everything that breathes when you invade this, that, and the other city. Show mercy to none. Kill everything, including young, suckling infants. And again, I must say, no matter how hard you try to twist and contort, to grind that square peg into powder so that you can make it fit into the round hole, the fact ever still remains that your wonderful, loving God, my dearly deluded Bible dupe friends out there, your dearly beloved, loving deity commanded the mass murder of little baby, rah, 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 for the Yah. Once again, just on that basis alone, forget all the other multitudinous problems I pointed out with that bastard in the sky. Just on that basis alone, you've got a real problem. It's like walking out of the bathroom with that piece of toilet paper stuck to your shoe and you're dragging it around everywhere you go. As long as you continue to hold to your delusionary beliefs in that detestable book and that detestable God, you're walking around with that strand of toilet paper, just making a complete arse of yourself. When are you going to cut it off? Cuts you off. Anyway, Yahweh, of course, also frequently instructed Moses, Joshua, et al. Oh, well, I'm repeating myself. I just made that point. Yeah, to kill everything that breathes, including young suckling infants. But yeah, guys, it's obvious. In wake of all the other parallels we've looked at in the Popol Vuh, in the Aztec Codex, it's obvious where this damn thing came from. Anyway, of all the passages in the Codex that refer to human sacrifice, one in particular stands out above all the rest for the breadth of its implications. And here it is, several paragraphs long, but it's very interesting. It states, well, it is told and related that many times during the life of Quetzalcoatl, sources tried to ridicule him into making the human payment, into taking human lives. But he always refused. He did not consent because he greatly loved his subjects, who were Toltecs. Snakes, birds, and butterflies that he killed were what his sacrifices always were, it says. And it is told and related that with this, he wore out the sorcerer's patience. So it was then, the sorcerers, they were servants of Yaotl. So it was then that they started to ridicule him and make fun of him. The sorcerers saying that they wanted to torment Quetzalcoatl and make him run away. Came true. It happened. Then they tell how Quetzalcoatl departed. It was when he refused to obey the sorcerers about making the human payment, about sacrificing humans. Then the sorcerers deliberated among themselves, they whose names were Texcatlipoca, Ihuencantli, and Toltecantli. They said, quote, he must leave this city, he shall live there. You know, go back where he came from. And so, as the legend goes, that's exactly what happened. The great white god, wearing a robe with crosses on it, sailed back from whence he came, but promised to return one day. But he was driven out because he refused to follow the sorcerers of Yah, who demanded human sacrifice. Which, once again, we find in the Torah many times. And later it's admitted by the fire-breathing dragon called Yahweh in the book of Ezekiel, as I read yesterday, that he did, in fact, give these bad laws to Israel, requiring the sacrifice of the firstborn. What do you say now, Bible dupes out there? Did you know your God commanded human sacrifice? I got to stress this because, once again, Bible believers insist that their deity is superior
To those evil pagan gods of ancient world religions that practiced human sacrifice. Why? Moloch required babies to be passed through the fire.
Yahweh did the same thing. The only reason why Yahweh condemned this practice of the heathen is not because passing babies through the fire was evil in Yahweh's eyes. Oh, no. That's not why he called it evil. He called it evil because they were doing it to another, on behalf of another god, in the name of another god instead of him. That's the problem. If they were passing babies through the fire in his name, in his honor, he would have liked that. He would have gotten his rocks off on that. But no, they were doing it to other gods on behalf of other gods. That was the problem. That was the only problem. So get it right, Bible dupes. There's nothing better about my God's better than your God. My God's better. Knock it off. Grow up. Get a clue. Read your damn book for once in your life. Actually read what the hell it says. And then ask yourself a real deep, they'll believe, in this damn book. Can I still follow it? Can I still arrogantly proclaim that I have something here to hang a hook on, something to be proud of, that I can still hold my head high and think that I'm on to something big, and that anyone who doesn't follow this same book is hellbound? You're hellbound if you do follow it. Damn it. Anyway. But, this last passage I just read is very interesting, for in it we find an outline of a peculiar story emerging. The old order, represented by Quetzalcoatl, which refused to institute human sacrifice, was now coming to an end. The new order, represented by 3 sorcerers who eventually forced Quetzalcoatl to abandon his city and take it over, was now being put into place, which is what the conquistadors saw when they came. These 3 sorcerers, along with King Quetzalcoatl, yet another variation, perhaps, of the Aztec version of the Hiram Abyss story, with the dedication of a temple by sacrifice. Sacrifice is again referred to in this last passage as a payment, a debt, and Quetzalcoatl's refusal to institute the practice is, perhaps, suggestive of the fact that he did not accept the whole notion of payment and debt to begin with.
That we owed something to the gods.
Think about that for a minute. According to the great Yahya, you have to offer sacrifice, human or bullock, or a lot of bullocks, or cattle or whatever. You have to shed blood because of your sins, because you owe something to Yahya. Yet, at the same time, this schizophrenic book teaches that, when we're born into this world, we didn't make a choice. The choice to be sinners and born into sin was made, supposedly, according to the fairy tale book of Genesis. The choice was already made for us by our forebears, our original parents, Adam and Eve, right? They made the choice. So how the hell could we possibly owe anything? How could we actually, without our choice, be allowed to be born into sin, according to the Bible, when we never made a conscious choice for our own selves? Imagine a God like that, ladies and gentlemen. Think about it for a minute. Forget all his other psychopathic traits. Just on that basis alone, for thousands and thousands, and who the hell many knows how many thousands of years, supposedly, since the supposed time of Adam and Eve, we're supposed to believe that the entire history of the human race has been living in desperation, dying, suffering from disease, from famine, from rape, from murder, whatever, right? All because of something that those 2 individuals did that we had no say in, that we might not agree with, that we wouldn't have made that same choice if in their shoes, right? And yet, the explanation that book gives is so outrageous. And yet, this is what Bible dupes accept. They think that an arrangement like this makes sense as far as coming from a supposed all-loving and all-knowing and all-caring and compassionate deity. Oh, you better check your frickin' brain out real careful. There's something seriously wrong with your neurological functioning capacity, that you can't reason out that there's something desperately wrong with that can't be the product of an all-loving, no way, no fucking way. Anyway, be a religious one necessarily, but nevertheless, the religious overtones are pretty strong, and you can't resist the temptation. Absolutely fascinating stuff. Anyway, as I mentioned yesterday, this topic kind of ties in with another set of notes I put together a while back on the Canaanites and their practice of human sacrifice. Where did that come from? So we'll look at that in just a moment, but I'm seeing a new phone number calling in, so I hope I haven't been keeping them waiting too long. Area code 615, you're on the air.
Hey, Charlie, I'm just at work here listening, man. Just listen to the
okay, no
playing
problem.
going on.
Put you back on hold.
Thank you, sir.
You bet. All right. So anyway, let's check this out here. Very similar. Ties right along the lines of, and I guess I never did broadcast this. I thought I did. I thought it might have been back on Waking America. Apparently, I never did. Or if I did, I didn't mark it as already aired. Not usually, I always do, but I guess every once in a while it might have forgotten for some reason. But I usually mark it in my list of outlines. I'll mark that I had already aired it, and I'll even mention the network I aired it on. But this wasn't marked as broadcast. So if, in fact, I did broadcast this at some point in the past, my apologies. I haven't done that too many times, but there's been a couple times where I've done that, rebroadcast something I already talked about. Try to go to great measures to prevent that, but it has happened. Sometimes I have rebroadcast deliberately, like, I've done a few shows that I did on Waking America. I've done them over again, and I'll do some more of them over again because they're very important, and I know a lot of people never even heard them when I broadcast them the first time. So I will repeat those. But another thing I've done, and this is really frustrating, because you can spend hours and hours working on something. I've had this happen several times, and I really need to in the future make sure I go through my list and search and make sure that I didn't already put notes together. I have probably a half a dozen times. I've researched a topic only to discover, son of a gun, I already have a set of notes on that topic that I did years earlier, had completely forgotten. I had no idea that I had already, that's frustrating. Because, I spent, 4, 6, 8 hours sometimes. What I'll do in that case is I'll open up the other file and look at them side by side and see what new things I may have discovered that I didn't have in the original set of notes and then incorporate them together. But it's still frustrating because you get done and you think, oh, good, I got a new topic now. And you realize I just, wasted away a whole afternoon. It's funny. Then there's other shows that, you literally whip together in half an hour or an hour or something. Then there's others that take a week. I've had shows. I just finished a set of shows. It's a series of 2 outlines that correspond with one another. And each of them took about a week for each one. They're very lengthy. Each set of notes is about 100 pages each. So I don't know when I'll get around to that. It's going to take a while to go through them, but very, very interesting stuff. Anyway, let's look at this Canaanite thing here. The Phoenicians, of course, were an offshoot of the Canaanites. And the Canaanites are mentioned in the Old Testament as having been hideous practitioners of child sacrifice. For example, in Leviticus 18:21, the great and noble Yahweh is depicted as giving this command to the ancient Israelites. He says, do not give any of your children to be sacrificed to Moloch, a Canaanite Phoenician deity. For you must not profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. Understand what this means. The great Yahweh here, and this is what Bible dupes want you to think, the great Yahweh here is not against child sacrifice. Oh, no, 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 no. He's against child sacrifice to other deities. But they'll point your attention to verses like this to try to give you the idea that Yahweh was against killing little babies. Oh, no, 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 no. No, sorry, Bible dupes. Your great Yahweh, the horn, fangs, and claws bearer, your great Yahweh, he loved, absolutely loved human sacrifice, especially little babies. He got his little marbles off on it. Anyway, you get the same thing in 2 Chronicles 28, verse 3, which says, he, King Ahaz of Israel, burned sacrifices in the valley of Ben Hinnom and sacrificed his children in the fire, engaging in the detestable practices of the Canaanite nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. Why were these practices detestable? Because they burned children in the fire? No, 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 no. They were detestable because they did this in homage to other gods other than Yahweh. If they burn their kids in honor or in homage to Yahweh, then it would have been okay. Anyway, we must ask, is there any archaeological evidence to substantiate this biblical accusation against the Canaanites? Did the Canaanites, in fact, engage in sacrifice of little children? The Bible is emphatic about it, talks about it all over the place. What do we have in the archaeological record to substantiate this? Let's take a close look. Over the past several decades, archaeologists have been extensively excavating burial sites of Achziv, which is a major ancient port city of the Canaanites/Phoenicians. These burial sites were utilized over a period of roughly 400 years, from the 10th to the 6th centuries BC. Anyway, scientists discovered that although some of the burials contained cremated bodies, bodies of adults, there were none that were found of children. They did find cremated bodies, indicating, burnt offerings, but they were bodies of adults, not children. Absolutely no evidence has ever been uncovered of burnt bodies of children in any of the extensive digs that have been undertaken in the area, which have been going on, again, for decades on end. No evidence of child sacrifice. You look at the fairy tale mythological book called the Bible, it is loaded with references of the Canaanites having practiced this evil, hideous practice. But again, it's not in the archaeological record. It's not there. In the September-October 2010 issue of Biblical Archaeological Review, or Biblical Archaeology Review, anyway, in an article called Buried Treasure from Israel's Phoenician Neighbor, we read this interesting quote. Yeah, I wrote it as Biblical Archaeological Review. It's actually Biblical Archaeology Review. Anyway, it says, what cannot be debated is that in the northern cemetery of Akziv, we found a crematorium where the dead bodies were burned. This is the only crematorium ever discovered in an early Phoenician cemetery. After the corpse, which apparently was placed on a bed of branches, was burnt, bones were collected in an urn. When we examined the contents of these urns, it says, we were surprised to see that the bones had been carefully collected, including even the smallest, and that the entire skeleton could be reassembled, albeit shrinking to a half or 2/3 its original size because of being burnt. Although several burials of children were found scattered among the urn burials, none showed any signs of cremation. Is there evidence in the Akziv cemetery of infants who were cremated? It asks. Definitely not. The cremated burials were only of adults. The article is absolutely emphatic on this issue. So you know what we're looking at here, don't you? You do know what we're looking at here. The Bible claiming the Canaanites were sacrificing little babies constantly, and yet the archaeological record says nothing about this. You know what this is. You know what this amounts to, don't you? This is our tribe projecting their evils on others that they want to demonize. Imagine that. Let's see now. I wonder if we could come up with a more recent parallel to this. Where have we seen the tribe doing things like this in more recent times? Let's see now. What's that country in Europe? Starts with a G. Let me see now. My friggin' God. They've been at this game for a long time, haven't they? A long time. Their hideous, perfidious, despicable, disgusting evils have been pawned off on others in an attempt to make themselves look good and others look bad. And you know what? Unfortunately, it's always worked with the dumb arse masses, and it still does. If there was any passing through the fire of infants on the part of the Canaanites or Phoenicians, say scientists, as we're told in the Bible, it was probably nothing more than a mere purification ceremony, akin to modern infant baptism practiced in the Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches, and had nothing to do with actually burning the infants in any way. And that can be done in such a way that you don't bring any harm to the baby. Not that it's a good idea, but, you know, you can do it as long as you don't bring them near the tip of the flame. You can do this yourself. I used to do it as a kid and freak people out that weren't familiar with, with the practice. But did you ever pass your finger through a flame of a candle? Very easy to do. All you got to do is pass it through the middle of the flame. You can actually feel the flame. And I don't mean the heat. You don't really feel the heat when you do it, if I remember right. But you can feel that it's a thicker air, if you will, than the air around, the rest of the room. When you pass your finger through the flame, you can kind of feel it. Not really the heat. Where you're touching really isn't that hot. You can't leave it there. Of course not. But fairly quickly, not too quick, because you could put the thing out. But if at an even pace, you just pass your finger casually right through the flame. You'll just cause it to, flicker a little bit, but it won't even singe any hairs you have on your finger or, nothing. And so this is probably what was being done. Now, don't anybody email me later and tell me you burnt yourself passing your finger through the... If you burn yourself, you're doing it wrong, obviously. But, it can be done with ease. And so this is probably what they were doing with the infants. If at all they did such a thing as the Bible insists upon, that this was a common practice, they were doing it all the time. If there's any truth to it, that's got to be all it was. They were passing them through the center of the flame, which isn't, really hot. It didn't cause any harm to the baby. And to them, it represented a purification ceremony. It had nothing to do with roasting them alive. On the other hand, we know another group of people that did practice this. Yes. The ones who tried to demonize and did demonize and still has them demonized in the minds of many people today who read that damn book and believe what's in there, like other ridiculous stories about talking donkeys, demonized them as practitioners of infanticide when they were the ones doing it. Holy friggin' horse crap, man. So, look at the parallel here. Just like what we were just talking about with the Maya and the Aztecs. The only difference is the Maya and the Aztecs did practice human sacrifice. But where did they get it from? Well, we've already seen that, haven't we? You come to the Canaanites, they didn't practice human sacrifice. Well, not baby sacrifice anyway, not child sacrifice. They did find evidence of adult sacrifice. So, all of these cultures did practice human sacrifice. But not babies among the Canaanites. Not babies. The Maya, yeah. The Aztecs, yeah, they did kill babies. Not that any human sacrifice is acceptable, but Canaanites did not roast their children. Passing through the fire, once again, if there's any truth to it, had nothing to do with burning them alive. But we do know that the tribe that wrote that detestable book called the Bible, they did practice this. Abso-freaking-lutely. Anyway, in the January-February 2010 edition of this same journal, Biblical Archaeology Review, or BAR, we just looked at the September-October 2010 edition. But earlier that year, the January-February edition, in an article entitled Skeletal Remains from Punic Carthage Do Not Support Systematic Sacrifice of Infants, the following more frank admission was made. So this is two articles they published that same year. And do realize the source here. This is a very interesting source. This is a biblical archaeological magazine. A magazine which you have to commend them. A magazine that's supposed to be designed to prove the Bible through archaeology, and yet here they are. 3 cheers for them. Here they are admitting, in this instance anyway, that the archaeological record does not prove the Bible. In fact, it disproves it, in this particular instance anyway. Disproves it. Here's what it says. Classical descriptions of repeated large-scale infant sacrifice were exaggerations, if not anti-Carthaginian propaganda. Ooh, 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 ooh. There you have it. Yet another lie found in the infallible Word of God. But do you understand the significance of these statements that we're reading here? This is from Biblical Archaeology Review, a Christian publication that's supposed to be intended to prove the Bible. Here they are admitting, and notice how they worded it. Classical descriptions of repeated large-scale infant sacrifice. They're talking here about the Bible, ladies and gentlemen. That's where we get these classical descriptions of repeated large-scale infant sacrifices amongst the Canaanites. That's where we get this idea from, the Bible. They're saying here that the Bible, in making these claims, collectively, quote, exaggerations, if not anti-Carthaginian propaganda. Imagine that. And here they were demonizing the Carthaginians, which, you know, they had made fat wads of cash from by hijacking their trade empire, and the Phoenicians before them. They used these people to make fat wads of cash, and then later, here they are demonizing them. They're evil. They passed their children through the flames when they were the ones that were burning their kids alive. Oh, man, you just got to love it. But once again, I can't stress enough the importance of this. This is a biblical archaeological magazine admitting that these classical descriptions of repeated large-scale infant sacrifice, referring here to these biblical references, are exaggerations and anti-Carthaginian propaganda. Yes. They're admitting the Bible has propaganda in it. Oh, does it ever? In fact, I must apologize. I can't say that the Bible has propaganda in it. That's not a correct statement. The Bible is propaganda. Anyway, with all that said and done, it's not even necessary to go this route now. For the duration of these notes, I go on to talk about infant sacrifice amongst the tribe. Well, maybe we'll look at a couple examples because these are different from the ones I've cited before. This is an instance where Yahweh is condemning the practice of his chosen ones of infant sacrifice. But once again, I need to point out, he wasn't upset that they were sacrificing their infants. That's not the issue at all. It was that they were doing it, again, to other gods instead of him. If they were sacrificing their kids to him, he would have cheered it on. But here's some examples here. This is Ezekiel 23, 36, and 37. It says, they, the Israelites, have committed adultery, and blood is on their hands. They committed adultery with their idols. They even made the children they bore to me pass through the fire as food for them. So again, his problem here is not that they were doing this to their kids. Not that that itself was the hideous thing going on here. It's that they were doing it to other gods. Plain and simple. Anyway, here's another one, 2 Kings 23:10. The Israelites desecrated Topheth, which was in the valley of Ben Hinnom, so no one could use it to make his son or daughter pass through the fire to Moloch. This is his problem. This is his beef, that it was being done to Moloch instead of to himself. Do you understand, once again, guys, I have to stress this. It's so important. Bible dupes want you to think that they have superior moral standards, or, in fact, that they have moral standards at all, and that non-believers don't have moral standards. But look at how moral this God-damnable, detestable book actually is. Look how moral it is. When Yahya Boy commands the murder of little babies, that's okay. You talk about moral freaking relativism. Bible dupes do not believe that baby killing is unacceptable. They believe it's unacceptable only when Yahweh isn't commanding it or when it's done for another god other than Yahweh. But they do believe in baby killing. They do. They have to. They can't tell you they don't believe in baby killing because they'd be going against their great Yahweh, their wonderful, loving, compassionate, endearing, tender, merciful God, Yahweh. I can't stress it enough, guys. They're not moral. They are incredibly, profidiously immoral to embrace this kind of filth. I'll just read one more here. Jeremiah 30 and 31 says, they have set up their detestable idols. You see once again here what Yahweh's beef was. It's not that, burning their babies was detestable. It's that they were burning them to other gods. They have set up their detestable idols in the house that bears my name and have defiled it. They have built the high places of Topheth in the valley of Ben Hinnom to burn their sons and daughters in the fire, something I did not command, nor did it enter into my mind. What he's really saying here is, it didn't enter into my mind to have them burn their babies to Moloch. But of course, it did enter his mind for them to burn their babies to himself, to sacrifice their firstborn, and to kill all the babies of the heathen, whithersoever they wenteth. Anyway, let's see here. Let's take a look at a few more considerations. This subject would be given incomplete coverage if a few more pertinent facts were not mentioned. It turns out that Carthage was described by some among its competitors, like Rome, for example, as having practiced child sacrifice. For example, Plutarch, circa 46 to 120 AD, mentioned the practice, as did Tertullian, Orosius, Diodorus Siccubus, and a couple others. But where did they get this idea from? Were they relating historical fact? Was it simply propaganda? Because, of course, the Romans and the Carthaginians were mortal enemies, the Punic Wars. It must be pointed out that the time of their writings, first of all, was long after the period that the Bible claims child sacrifice was being offered by the Phoenicians, and at a time when it was to Rome's advantage to spread propaganda against its enemy. Punic Wars lasted from 264 to 146 BC, but the animosity they incurred lasted for generations thereafter. So even though this is long after the Punic Wars had ended, these Roman authors, there was still feuding going on. They were still bitter enemies. So this was just propaganda, just as it was, as the Biblical Archaeology Review admitted, in the Old Testament. It's just anti-Carthaginian propaganda. Just because the Romans stated that the Carthaginians were doing this centuries earlier doesn't make it fact. Again, they weren't writing contemporaneously, and they were writing about a people that they had been warring against for centuries on end. It's propaganda. That's all it is. The archaeological record, ladies and gentlemen, does not substantiate the claims either in the Old Testament or by these much later Roman authors. So out the window that goes. Kind of sounds like World War II Nazi propaganda, doesn't it? Anti-Nazi propaganda. It's important to note also that Livy, from 59 BC to 17 AD, and Polybius, circa 200 to 118 BC, did not mention anything about child sacrifice being practiced among the Phoenicians. And they lived, at a much earlier time, of course. So if the accounts that such a thing did happen can be at all relied upon what we can conclude from this is that child sacrifice was a later innovation, most likely adopted from contact with the heebie-jeebies, and not the other way around. If the claims of the later Roman authors from the 1st, 2nd, 3rd century can be relied upon, all that means is they practiced it at a much later date, the Carthaginians, but not earlier on, as the Old Testament would have us believe. Anyway, I should mention, there have been burnt baby and infant bones that have been found in Phoenician toffets or fire pits, but they date to a much later period, the early centuries AD. So, again, the Romans that we just cited from that era who made reference, if there was child sacrifice going on, it's in reference to this later period. However, there's no indication that these burnt child and infant bones were sacrificed. They might simply have practiced cremation, and thus they burnt their bodies after they died. There's no evidence that they were burned while alive. So out the window, completely out the window goes the claims in the Old Testament of the Canaanites burning their babies in the fire to Moloch. If they put babies through any fire at all, once again, it was done as a purification ceremony which brought no harm to the babies whatsoever. It was the equivalent of babies having a little water sprinkled on their forehead today as what you see being done, for example, in the Catholic Church with baby baptism. That's all it was. They use water today, whereas the Carthaginians used fire back then. Both harmless, having nothing to do with burning babies. But we do know who did burn babies, who did sacrifice babies, don't we? At the command of the all-loving, merciful, gracious deity, Yahya, or Yaoso, as the Aztecs called him. So there's yet another fairy tale that we can toss out the window into the scrap heap, can't we? Another fairy tale from that damnable, detestable book, demonizing surrounding cultures so they look good themselves. It's so disgusting. Anyway, looks like we do have another caller here. I don't know if they're calling to listen or not. Caller, are you there?
Yes, I had heard that the Yahweh Slayer cometh, and now the Yahweh Slayer has arrived. Good
Back up and running.
Good to hear you on this network. Can you imagine?
I should have come here or stayed here in the first place. But anyway,
yeah.
What are you going to say?
Yeah. Coulda, shoulda, woulda, right?
Yeah. I felt obligated. I was in an awkward situation. Some friends had recommended that I go there, and I had already started. What I was going to do is just have one show on here a week. And then, they offered me a couple shows on that network. But then all of a sudden, they called me and said, we can do it 5 days a week. Well, just after that, I found out that I had an offer similar here. And reluctantly, I turned it down because I had already made it was kind of one of those confused. But looking back, I made the wrong choice back then. I did.
Well, no need to explain. We enjoy your shows no matter where they are. I wanted to put out this idea, which ties into what you were speaking of earlier. Can you imagine Jewish leaders promulgating the notion that it doesn't matter which God they follow? Can you imagine Jewish leaders spewing these absurdities I hear, absurdities like the following? It doesn't matter whether they worship Yahweh, Athena, or if they adhere to a Viking identity creed. No, they understand implicitly that the God you worship defines you. And your religion, a people's religion, has a very deep structure, psychological resonance throughout
Absolutely.
that culture. Yes,
And
whether
that's all
or
the
not,
more reason why Gentiles need to wake up and stop worshiping this demon god. It does identify you. If you identify with a demon, what kind of person ultimately are you? This monster is as evil as you can get.
Well, I'll tell you, this network is full of some very brave, free-thinking individuals who I admire. However, there are a lot of people who call in, guests and whatnot in particular, who have, how can we put it, partially awoken. It's like when you awake in the middle of the night and you still have a dream, fresh in your memory, and you're not sure whether or not it was a dream. You're not completely awake, shall we say. And I hear this constantly, that it doesn't matter if you're Christian identity or a pagan or an atheist, and it just occurred to me, no, the reason the tribe is on top is because they understand it matters. I forget which Jewish leader it was, but a quite prominent one said, I myself am not a believer. However, I recognize that without our religion, we would have gone extinct like so many other peoples we lived amongst. They understand on some deep level that it's their stubborn adherence to Yahweh that keeps them unified and strong. And in fact, there have been even Jewish writers who have indicated that they had become non-religious, but when their rabbis explained to them that Yahweh was in effect the Jewish people, bells went off in their minds, light bulbs exploded, and suddenly they became religious again. So you see, at the very top levels, they understand that their religion is their people, whereas the dumb goyim, and that is the proper term, that is what they've become by and large, don't understand that. They think it's just, some trivial matter, a people's history, literature, native religions, beliefs, philosophies, just some trivial nonsense that could be dispensed with. So I don't literally believe in Athena or Zeus or Wotan or any of that, of course, on a literal level. But these things are important, and whether or not one subscribes to that notion, certainly we can agree, if we're sane, and I know you would agree, you have, that this adherence to anything Abrahamic is just beyond insanity.
Yeah. Look at, along the lines of what you were just saying, look at, the kamikaze, for example. How did they get people to do this, to slam into ships, to sink the ship and killing themselves along with it? They had the Japanese believing that the emperor was a god. And so if you obey your god, you're going to have the promise of the afterlife. And that's how Islam got such a good, send-off, too. The idea that fighting for Islam, you're a warrior for Allah, and you're going to go immediately to this place of glory and have 10,000 virgins, servicing you, whatever, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. They know this. They've made such good use of it, they're never going to give it up. It's not only a way to manipulate the goy. They manipulate their own kind this way.
Certainly. I agree fully. And in a sense, the kamikaze religion and the Mohammedan religion are true in a sense. These people who are sacrificing themselves in this manner are helping or furthering the cause of their own progeny. So
Yeah.
in the only way that a man can live on, he will, if his society is victorious and adheres to its unifying creed. Now, it gets complicated with regard to the Mohammedans because, of course, they've been Yahweh infected as well, as you pointed out. But I get your overall point. I concur with your overall point there. I'm envisioning a novel or a film. Of course, I don't have the time or the means to produce either, but I'm envisioning a film where the shackles of our current bankster leaders are finally thrown off, only to have this CI movement, rise up and take their place and become even worse in effect. I can see that nightmare scenario unfolding in my mind, just like I'm watching a film already produced. And I don't like the smell of it. I don't like the smell of it one bit.
Oh, yeah. As always, as soon as religion gets power, the first thing it wants to do is exterminate anyone and everyone that doesn't agree with them. It's always been that way and always will. And I'll tell you, if you've ever talked with, any religious people, the fanaticism, you can just taste your blood on their lips. You can smell it, I should say. They look at you with such absolute pure hatred. They're hoping for the day when they get power so they can kill you. That's how their religion will stand unchallenged, is they get rid of anyone who questions it. They can't defend it. They know damn well, against someone who actually knows that damn book and can expose it for what it is, they can't defend their position. It's absolutely, without foundation, without any defense. So they have to shut up. This is why all through the centuries, the Dark Ages, you had the Inquisition and the Crusades. You've got to go to war with those. The infidels. The Muslims have the same mentality, don't they? If your religion is so sure and solid, you don't need political power or military might to back it up. And you certainly would not want to be killing people anyway because you love them, right? And you want to win them over to Jesus or Allah. The fact that you've got to take up the sword is the best argument against the damnably detestable filth right there.
Yes, and what a lot of people simply don't realize is that the human mind is multi-layered, and I don't think Freud was wrong about everything. I think some of his ideas pertaining to the subconscious and the id...
Karl Marx wasn't either. He called it the opium of the masses. It is.
Right. And I think Freud probably stole his better ideas from those whose names we shall not know. And, mixed them with, as you say, the plague that he brought, that he boasted of bringing in his own diary. But, this idea, this overarching idea that somehow all that matters is deposed. This idea that, we'll worry about religion later, when we cast off the shackles that bind us currently. No, because at that point you'll have a very swift and powerful consolidation of Christian forces. Who knows? Perhaps even allied with Mohammedan forces. And it'll be too late. This is the point. Right now, when everything's up in the air, when the sparks are flying upwards, so to speak, it's right now that these absurdities, that these Bible dupes have to be spoken to very, very bluntly and harshly. Right now, not later. It'll be too late.
Right.
So this is why I'm glad you're on. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's great to have something, to believe in and to stand for. Absolutely. But stand for something that really is a solid foundation, not crap like that. Come on.
Right. I mean, look, I'm not I don't completely rule out the possibility of life after death. I've read some
I don't either. Nobody
I know.
knows.
I've read some very interesting materials from, say, Dr.
Quite frankly,
Jeffrey
I hope there is something beyond this friggin' place.
Yeah, I do too. I really do. But I know with absolute, utter, and unfailing conviction that the Abrahamic faiths and their various offshoots are pure poison and can't possibly be true. I know that utterly, completely, and without reservation at this point. I'll tell you, I was a free thinker from my earliest coherent utterances. However, even so, it took me decades to completely free myself of the Bible, to cut that biblical umbilical cord.
Sure.
It took decades. I kept partially backsliding and this and that, but wow, it took the better part of my life to achieve absolute freedom. And who knows? Perhaps
it's like a big molar, you know. It's deep. You got to keep pulling and twisting, and it doesn't just pop out.
Absolutely, but you'll hear these guys even on the top-rate networks now. You know, there's one particular individual, a doctor. I forget what he's a doctor of. Possibly a doctor of delusions, but I won't name him because he is a very nice guy and he has a lot of perceptions that are quite valid. But he was trying to convince me that Jesus wasn't a Jew because it says in the Talmud that Mary was impregnated by a Roman soldier. Now, how could it not occur to a doctor that even if that's true, which it may be, Mary herself was a Jewish woman, and according to Jewish law, it's all matriarchally based. If you have a Jewish mother, you're Jewish. Now, why would I even have to point that out? I mean, you're busy pointing out so many absurdities at once with these people. You literally can't keep up. You need 5 mouths in your head. You have to be like a
Did you catch the interview I did with Banjo Billy there last week?
You know, I didn't. What network was that on?
Well, it was the last show on the previous network there.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I usually catch all your shows one way or another.
I'm not sure if it wound up on Mammies or not. I don't know. Some people have indicated they couldn't find it. I couldn't even tell you where to go to find it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe Kyle will post it later, as if he doesn't have enough to do. But you have to.
But
be,
anyway,
I
mentioned it because the poor guy, great guy. Don't get me wrong, and I really enjoyed our discussion. And he's written some good stuff. But wow, man, when it comes to the religion thing, holy mother of Christ! I didn't even want to get into it with him because number one, I didn't want to argue with the guy. Number two, that was off the track of what we were talking about anyway. But the one thing I wish, if he stayed on the phone with me after the show, I wouldn't want to get into it on air and get into an argument, But I'd like to get him alone and say, hey, buddy, you're a big Jesus fan. You think he's so much better than that horrible Old Testament. He does agree the Old Testament is horrible. Great. But how in the hell can he sell the great Jesus, who was a major fan of the Old Testament? He loved Moses. He loved Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, on and on and on and on. I mean, where's he coming from?
Well,
how do these people think you can separate these two damn books called the Old and New Testament? What's that?
Well, there are very clear quotations of Jesus. He's come to fulfill the prophets, and the law. So there's no question about it. I think what happens is this. There's an emotional bond that's created in these people's minds with Jesus because that bond is created visually. First of all, you see the picture on your grandmother's wall of the blonde-haired, meek rock star Jesus, who cares about all your problems, who's going to help you find your car keys, even though there's children being tortured to death in the world right now. He's going to help you find your car keys, though. He's going to help you get, under Mary Lou's panties Saturday night. He's going to help you do that, but he's not going to save little Billy down the street from getting run over by an ice cream truck.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. But anyway, it's an emotional thing, and once you're bonded emotionally, it simply overpowers the logic centers of the brain.
Yeah,
I mean,
it does. It overrides it.
Yeah, it's like
bypasses it.
It's like being in love with a woman or something that is not good for you. It's the same darn thing. That's all there is to it. But then, instead of these people kind of admitting that, they'll actually utter things like, I'm convinced that Christian identity is correct, both archaeologically, philosophically. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. And then you point out this hard archaeological evidence that the ancient Israelites, looked like Barbara Streisand and Alan Douchebagwitz. There's paintings there's paintings of their delegations on what do you call those damn triangles in Egypt? I forget, but there's the pyramids. There's
the
paintings.
pyramids,
there's paintings on the pyramids, for crying out loud. There's visual representations of what they look like on King Tut's sandals. I mean, but still, they'll just come right on the next week and say, I'm convinced Christian identity is correct, both archaeologically and philosophically, and what can you do? I mean, you need some kind of advanced intervention deprogramming team.
Yeah.
To just toss them in a black bag and take them in a room somewhere, and I don't know. It's just these people are what I call functionally insane. They can pay the bills and go. Oh,
you're gonna love this
day.
one. I was in the chat room a few days ago. Again, the religious chat room, and this friggin' guy is debating with a non-believer, right? And it was a woman, too. He actually says this. He says, I'm going to pray tonight that God will curse you, that something bad will happen to you, and that will bring you around and humble you. Can you freaking believe it?
Right. Oh, yeah, of course I believe it. I've been resisting this since childhood, for crying out loud. I mean, within my own family.
So let me say emphatically, once again, you Bible believers out there that can't handle your phony religion being attacked for the fraud that it is, your anger is the best refutation of your fraudulent religion. I don't have to say a word, nor does anybody else.
That's good. Unfortunately, you have to say many more words, but overall, your point, the first part of your point there is very well taken. Yeah, their anger itself is proof that you've gotten through to them on the conscious level, on the logical level, but there's this deeper emotional, subconscious level that's sending this hatred out. And that is what's happening. I'm completely convinced of it. And the only therapy for that is to replace their false visual idea and emotional idea of Jesus with an accurate one. There has to be paintings made of Jerry Seinfeld Jesus, and there has to be movies made of him, calling the woman who came to him for help a dog because she.
Oh yeah, you gotta love that one, huh? Isn't that great?
It's not there has to be a movie. It has to be a scene filmed that they can watch, particularly between the ages of 2 and 5. I mean, these are the cures, but of course,
with that guy Banjo Billy last week, I mentioned that passage where Jesus says, "Bring all those before me who won't accept me as king, and kill them in front of me." And again, it just shows that Bible believers don't even know what their book says. He had no clue. He had never heard that before.
Oh,
right.
I'll have to look into that. Where was that again?
And of course, I won't hear back from him. He's not going to respond.
No. I'm still waiting for my father to ask his priest about certain passages I brought out, and that was about 20 years ago. And I'm still waiting for Dr. Demento's article proving that Jesus was not, in fact, a Jew. And let's just say I'm not holding my breath. So
I had a discussion with this televangelist guy. He used to run a TV show called It Is Written. He was the host of the show. I confronted him one time with my book on the Trinity. This is while I was still a theology student, And the whole time I'm talking to him, he's looking down. He never looked up at me. And so after a couple minutes, you could tell he was getting nervous. He couldn't get out of there fast enough. So all of a sudden he breaks in and says, "Oh, as you might imagine, I'm a pretty busy guy. I have to get going. But do you have like a book or something you've written that I could look at?" I says, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, here you go." He saw that I was holding something, right? "Oh, I'll get back to you on this." Well, let's see. That was June of 1996.
Right.
So I'm sure he's still reading
being,
it and writing his response.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you're being too cynical. He'll call you anytime now.
Yeah, anytime now. Any day.
Yeah, that's the
I'll hold my
equivalent
breath.
that was the adult equivalent of, I think my mom's calling me. I got to go, I can't fight
I was going to
right
respond,
now.
but my dog ate it.
My dog ate it, yeah.
Yeah, it's so freaking pathetic, the whole goddamn thing.
It is beyond absurd. A new word has to be created for crying out loud.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, you may get some resistance from some of the listeners on this network pertaining to certain topics. I've called you and I've disagreed with you in a friendly manner about a few things here and there, but I think you're just invaluable with regards to this religious issue, and I hope this misguided love of unifying with everybody who is opposed to the current New World Order doesn't squash your freedom of speech. So I hope we can keep the Giuliani here unchained and unbound. No, I mean,
I'm still going to watch now that I'm in a good habit here with the language, I'm still going to watch that. That's the good idea.
I want to mention one last thing. That visual representation of Jesus, I should look this up before I even speak regarding it because I don't remember the particulars. But from what I heard at one point from a scholar is that visual was based on one of a pope's illegitimate sons. So it was one of those big Italian painters that was commissioned to do the original representation of Jesus that we all know and love. And he actually used for his model one of his pope's illegitimate sons. So grandmas everywhere across this fruited plain and beyond have been worshiping and looking at the dreamy blue-eyed gaze of the Pope's bastard for all these.
Well, look at the statue of Peter in St. Peter's Square. It's been kissed so many times over the centuries you can't count the toes on the feet. It's all smoothed over, and yet that very same statue was once kissed as Jupiter by the Romans.
Wow.
Gotta love that one. And of course, you got your big giant penis statue there, the obelisk right in the center, the big solar wheel, supposed evil pagan symbols right there. It's so mind-blowing. My God, man.
Yeah, there's a pagan praying stone, I can't recall now, somewhere in Europe. And it was believed holy because it was struck by lightning and people would put their hands on it and pray, and you could see over the centuries where literally just doing that, there's handprints in the stone. There's like roughly hand-shaped impressions in the stone, just amazing how that occurs on a molecular level until it becomes visually apparent, So, faith and belief and love and hope, of course, these are positive things, but like everything else, they've been grossly perverted and exploited. And the problem now seems intractable, but out of respect for Kyle, I'm not going to wax hopeless here on his network, but I just think it's great that you're here, that you're spreading the good news, and that's it, man. Great show.
All right, man. You want me to keep you on hold to listen, or?
Oh, no, I'll just listen on the internet, though. Thanks.
Okay, man. Thanks for the call.
You too. Bye.
Yeah, take care. Yeah, I don't make a habit of, in fact, I never check out blog sites. I don't have time for it. Not to mention, very often discussions just degrade at the childish triflings. I can't be bothered with that crap. But every once in a while, a listener will send me, a link. Check out what so-and-so said here or there. Anyway, the other day, somebody did just that. So I went in and I read a comment, and it just exemplifies the classic mindlessness of Bible dupes. The comment was in reference to me, and these believers were offended, that I was challenging their faith, and obviously, Catholics. I forget the exact wording now, but something to the effect that, how dare he attack our holy faith and our holy mother? Oh, my God, man. Unbelievable. Referring to Mary, our mother. Who the hell told you that she was your mother? Your frickin' misguided and misguiding religious leaders. Where did they get that idea? Once again, guys, you just gotta love this crap. That isn't even in your holy book. It's not there. Nowhere are you told that Mary is your mother. Nowhere are you told that you're to address prayers to her. Who cares what that book says? It's a bunch of crap anyway. But the point is, the Bible is the source of knowledge about Christ and his followers. That is the original source. Everything else came later, and many centuries later at that. This whole idea that Mary is to be worshipped and adored, and you have to have statues of her in your home, not only is not in the Bible, let me state once again, it's totally antithetical to what the Bible actually teaches. So I read comments like this, and oh my God, I want to register as being the member of another species other than human. If being human means to be like that, I don't want a part of it. Call me something else. Please tell me I am not from this same species that thinks and believes like this. Holy friggin' horse crap, man. The mindlessness of people. It's just frickin' mind-blowing. Anyway, since we're on this topic of religious scumbags, I was thinking of this the other day, and of all the stories that I've related on my show, I don't think I ever actually mentioned this one. So I got to mention this one. This is one of my favorites. Another part of the screw job I got from the steepled corporation that I was a part of. This happened even before I began my college experience, I already had gotten a taste of how corrupt and despicable organized religion was, even before I went to school. But at the time, you got to rationalize these things away. At the time, I was thinking, well, he's just one bad apple in the bunch. That's what I wrote it off as. I didn't yet see it as a symptom of a much bigger problem, that he was the norm, not the exception. But anyway, before I went to college, during my college years, I was a student pastor, and I received a small, and I do mean very small, stipend. But I didn't care. I did it because I enjoyed it. I didn't do it for the money. But that's just another aspect of how these abominable systems work. They take total advantage of students. It's free labor for them, essentially free. Literally, I think they gave me a couple $100, maybe $250 a month or something. It's so disgusting. And yet there they are, sucking you dry as a student with outrageous tuitions, and yet all the while, anybody related to anybody who worked at that college got free tuition. So to make up for that loss of revenue, they jacked everybody else's tuition up. So here it is. They take advantage of these students, paying them dirt wages to do just as much, if not more work than the regular ministers do. Just taking total advantage of these friggin' students, working hard, trying to put themselves through school and giving them dirt like that. Anyway, but prior to that, I had served 4 years as a lay pastor with no stipend, nothing. It was just all voluntary. But I did it because I enjoyed it. Blah blah blah. And I had in the back of my mind that maybe this is where God is leading me, and eventually, I was hoping that what would eventually happen is I would be hired as an actual minister full time, which, of course, back then, little did I know that, if you want to serve as a minister, you shouldn't be paid anyway. The whole idea of ministering to people means you're serving them. It shouldn't involve a frickin' paycheck. But nevertheless, that's the direction I was going. And so what I was hoping in my naivety, I was hoping that I was going to be able to get a job, that they would hire me as a full-time minister without having to go through the mental assembly line of, going to school, going into debt, crapping away, 4 years of my life. Nope, surprise, surprise. I did that for 4 years, and it became obvious to me that they were never ever going to hire me because they wanted to exploit me and make fat, juicy wads of cash. Not only that, I must point this out, it's not just about the money factor. It's also about making sure that you are adequately propagandized with the idea that your duty as a minister of, the steepled corporation is to uphold the policy of the corporation, regardless what the will of the people is that you're supposed to be serving. In other words, your edumacation is not just about picking your pocket. Sure, that's a big aspect of it. But it's also about training you or de-braining you, ridding you of a conscience so that your loyalties are with the system and nothing else. Anyway, so here it was. I worked voluntarily for 4 years as a lay pastor, right? All during that time, the minister who worked at a local church a few towns away, it was actually the, quote, mother church, if you will, of this church that I was lay pastoring. He was supposed to be the overseer of it, Guess how many times in that 4 years he showed his pathetic face? 0. He never, ever came. He had no interest in it. And why? Because it wasn't being attended by, affluent people like his church was. There was a doctor there and a lawyer, blah, 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 blah. there wasn't anything there to attract him. There was no big money coming in. Anyway. Once I announced to the church that I made a decision to go to school, to take up theology, and that I wanted to officially head into the ministry, blah, blah, blah. The church had a meeting to vote whether or not to stay open or to close in my absence. And of course, in the discussion about whether or not they would stay open, it was asked, well, is anybody willing to step forward and fill my shoes while I was gone? Nobody really could commit to that steadily. One guy said I could do it maybe once or twice a month, blah, blah, blah. But nobody else came forward, so they decided, okay, we're going to close. Well, guess what? Once word of that got back to the mother church, guess what happens? That bastard swoops down like a vulture. He couldn't get there fast enough. He shows up the very next week. I gave, a couple months announcement ahead of time, As soon as he heard that I was leaving, wow. And I knew this guy pretty well at that time. I knew he was all about money and show. And, one time he gave a sermon and he invited the president of a local bank in town, invited him so that he could give him, I don't even remember what the hell it was now. He had some frickin' little plaque made up or something. And, in recognition of your service to the community. Are you friggin' kidding me? This guy was so frickin' phony, man. He just wanted to get in with big money, hoping that maybe he might join the church and we can get bigger donations. That's all it was, you friggin' fat arse frickin' scam. Anyway, so I knew what he was coming for when he showed up the following week. I knew exactly what he was after. The church that I had been lay pastoring had accrued a fund over the past 4 years, the previous 4 years, of about $4,000. It was a building fund with the idea that, someday if the church grew big enough that we would want to get a piece of property and build a church, So it wasn't a tremendous amount of money, but, nevertheless, I knew that's what he wanted. So I'm sitting back watching the meeting play out, and he's throwing some ideas and questions, And then finally, after about an hour, he says, well, I was just wondering if anybody else has any other concerns. And he's looking around, hoping that somebody else was going to raise the issue of the $4,000 fund. He didn't want to have to be the one to bring it up. What a weaselly-ass little... Anyway, nobody else did. I knew what he wanted, and I wasn't going to give it to him. And perhaps other people there suspected that too. Some of them had to. I mean, everybody knew about this fund, but nobody brought it up. I think they wanted to let him, expose himself for what he was. So once he realizes nobody brings it up, he says, well, okay, if nobody else has anything else they want to raise, there is one particular issue. Yeah, right. This was his whole intention of coming in the first place. Again, it's like that phone call you get from that cousin you haven't heard from in friggin' 16 years. Hey, how's it going? What's happening? Yeah, how's things? How's the job? How's your wife? How's the kids? Blah, 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 blah. And after about 5 minutes, oh, by the way, and here it comes, what he's after. This was the whole purpose of the conversation. And it's usually, can I borrow, ... fill in the blank. Well, so it was with this little Weasley-ass scoundrel. Okay, since nobody else has any other issues they want to raise, there's one particular issue that I think needs to be addressed. And sure enough, it was the $4,000 fund. And what does he say next? Now, it's been policy within the church that when a fund like this accrues and the church folds, the mother church steps forward to assume responsibility for that money, i.e., I came here to take that money. Well, I took the opportunity to step forward and voice my opinion. I said, well, Pastor, that might be the church's policy. However, this money was donated by the members of this church, and I think we should call for a vote and have them decide what they want to do with it. Quite frankly, I didn't care what happened to the money. I just didn't like that this little bastard who never bothered with this church now suddenly out of nowhere swoops down like the vulture that he was and wants to suck this money up and fly off with it when he had no right to it at all. It wasn't his friggin' money. Anyway, he didn't like that one little bit. He gave me a look, oh, I'll tell you, but I was loving it inside. Anyway, sure enough, they took a vote. They actually voted, and guys, I didn't do this because I wanted the money, but they did vote to give it to me. They said I had been there 4 years, paid, and I'm going to school. I would need some money for school. They voted to give it to me. I loved it, not because I got the money. I loved it because he didn't get it. Do you know what he said, by the way, he wanted to use the money for? Which, this may have been BS. He probably was going to line his pocket with a good deal of it. But he said that, not to help some poor old lady suffering or some family that just lost their home. No. He said, to give it to this doctor at his mother church who recently had donated a video projector to the church. And so he wanted to give him this money to reimburse it. First of all, the doctor donated it. The doctor doesn't need money. He's already well off. And, quite frankly, it was probably a frickin' tax write-off or something. But can you imagine? Oh, man. This is a guy, by the way, who, as soon as this doctor showed up one day out of nowhere, he transferred his membership. He moved up here from Connecticut. No sooner did he transfer his membership, and immediately this same minister appointed him as the church's head elder. The church had been without a head elder for a year, and there was an elderly man who was not financially well endowed, who had wanted the position. Most of the church in fact, all of the church members agreed that, yeah, he'd be best suited for the job. Everybody had a great respect for him. He was a very caring person. Everybody wanted him to have that job. The minister never, ever raised the issue at any church board meeting to take a vote, never had him appointed. As soon as this doctor showed up, nobody knew him from a hole in the wall, but he appointed him immediately because he was an affluent person. What a fraud. But anyways. So we have this meeting. They vote, to give the money to me instead of to his little lackey doctor. So what do you think he does? Everybody else is filing out now. The meeting's adjourned. And so pretty much everybody had left, and it's just me and him. I stayed back because I'm cleaning out the place, getting it ready we were renting it from another group, and so I before we left, I would always clean up, so it was nice and tidy. Didn't want to leave a mess for them. And so he stayed behind with me. So now as I walk out, he's walking out with me. Everybody else is gone. He stayed there deliberately because he wanted to get me alone. He grabs me quite violently. He grabs my jacket, pulls me toward him. Big guy, this guy was over 6 feet tall. Crap, I think he might have been 6'3" or 4. He was pretty tall. Anyway, he grabs me and pulls me toward him, and he looks down his big fat nose at me and says, "You need to realize something. If you ever want to become a pastor in the Adventist church, your duty is to uphold the policy of the church." I just looked at him and I said, "No, buddy." And of course, I was still a dumbass Bible believer at the time, but I said, "No, buddy, my duty is to, go by the will of the people and the will of God." I thought I was standing up for, I was on just as much of a shaky foundation as he was. But nevertheless, in my naivety, I was sincere in stating, in other words, I'm going to do what's right what the will of the people is and not my check signers like you do. He didn't like that at all. I never saw that guy again after that. Never wanted to see him again after that. But you could just taste his barbs, I'll tell you. He was not a happy camper. Too bad, you sap. But guys, I got to tell you, man, this is how it is with most ministers. In fact, almost all of them. They're all like this. Scum. Absolute scum of the earth. They don't believe in the great Yah any more than I do. Most of them. You can count on the fingers of one hand the exception to that rule. There are a few, and I mean a very few, that are sincere. They're just as duped as their congregation. But most of them, guys, especially having gone through seminary, the sincere ones really, I would bet, are the ones that never went through seminary. They got lucky. They slipped through the cracks. They didn't get that mental programming. But the ones who go through seminary, you get a real unique behind-the-scenes glimpse of how the whole thing really works. You get to see how hard-lined these professors are. You get to work with other ministers and have them open up to you and tell you things that otherwise you never get to hear as a layperson. You see what a fraud it is. That's why I say I'm grateful for that experience. You know, I wish it didn't have to take so much time and money to do it, but I am grateful for that experience. Sometimes experiential learning, you can't substitute for it with book learning. You can't. Book learning is great, but nothing can take the place of experiential learning. Having gone through that, I got far more of a greater education than I ever bargained for with that than I could ever gotten, from the textbooks. Dealing with the professors, seeing how they operate behind the scenes, looking at how they were trying to buy me off. That's a conspiracy in action for you right there. But again, these people, it's not just that they're hypocritical or phony. They're freaking evil, ladies and gentlemen. They're evil. Just like politicians. Give them the opportunity. When they know they can get away with it, they'll freaking kill you. And by the way, I have heard stories when I was, a dupe in the cult. I had heard of several stories of ministers actually disappearing who were going against, their local conference leaders and stirring up a rat's nest. I remember 3 specific stories I was told of ministers disappearing. It happens. It happens in the Mormon church, big time. I mentioned this before. You got that thing called blood atonement doctrine, where if you leave the Mormon church, the real extremist conservative Mormons, like out in Utah, they believe, according to what Joseph Smith had taught, he came up with this idea of blood atonement. And in the Mormon context, it teaches that if you leave the Mormon church, you have committed essentially the unpardonable sin. And the only way you can atone for that sin is to have your own blood shed. And so they'll kill you. If any of you have ever seen the 2-part documentary series, The God Makers, for example. Again, it's a good documentary series, but it's made by, Bible dupes. So if you can get through watching something like that without puking, it is a good series. I mean, they do a great expose. They need to have a documentary produced exposing their fraudulent religious pretexts too, but nevertheless, of all the Christian cults out there, Mormonism is definitely the top 5 of the most dangerous. It is an abomination. But anyway, in that documentary series, off and on, they interview this one woman quite a bit who's a former Mormon. And, she tells her nightmare story and blah, blah, blah. At the very end of the documentary, they say that shortly after the completion of the production of this documentary, she disappeared. Never been seen again. So, obviously, she was sacrificed on the altar of blood atonement. Another victim of Joseph Smith's abominable doctrine of blood atonement. This happens, guys. It happens. It happens all the time. All the time. just like it does in El Governmente. You get high up the ladder enough, you start making problems, boom, you're dead. You know, look what they did to Sonny Bono. Ted Gunderson talked about this. He looked into it and found out that, oh yeah, look at that son of a gun. They said he died from hitting a tree while skiing, and yet the coroner's report that Gunderson got a hold of reveals that he died from multiple conchoidal fractures to the skull. You don't get multiple conchoidal fractures to your skull by hitting a frickin' tree, okay? And why was he murdered? Because at the time he was a congressman, and somebody had approached him with a suitcase full of documents exposing all kinds of corruption in Congress, and they asked him to look into it, and he said, oh, yes, I will make this my priority. He meant it. He fully intended to follow through on this, but of course, conveniently, he had that little accident. You remember that, by the way? I think it was in 1999. At the same frickin' time, within like a week, Michael Kennedy also died in a skiing accident. Oh, knock it off, man. Unbelievable. By the way, Bono was, essentially a professional skier. And as such, you don't just hit a frickin' tree. But like I said, he didn't hit the tree. They dumped his body near a tree. He had been bludgeoned to death. Frickin' scum. Anyway, but, not to that extreme, but I've seen firsthand how rotten stenching system works, guys. Whether it's religion, politics, it doesn't matter. This is how it works. And the real training to get you to become a yes man occurs while you're in college. That's where it begins. And that's why they have things like Skull and Bones to assure that your training is done right. They'll send you out on little errands for them to steal something when you prove yourself faithful. And they promise, don't worry, you won't get in trouble if you get caught. We got that all taken care of. It's just to get you to lose your conscience if you have one at all. And it's not enough for you to say you don't have one. They need to send you out on these errands to prove you don't, or to ruin your conscience if you do, to assure that it's gone. And so, yeah, they'll send you out, to steal something, and then when you do that, okay, then they'll move you to the next level, the next level. The next thing you know, they got you killing for them, or at least assisting in killing, whatever, Not only to sear your conscience, but also as bribe material later on, blackmail material. Should you ever open your mouth, they're going to, expose you. They'll bring forward the evidence. They do this with congressmen, don't they? They'll bring you in a back room after you've already been liquored up. Hey, look what we have for you. Isn't she a beauty? So now if you ever open your mouth, you ever become a problem, pictures of you and that beauty are going to be plastered all over the place. Or in some cases, if women isn't your thing, they'll bring in some child prostitutes or whatever, whatever it takes. They will have scrutinized you enough so they know what your hang-up is, and they use it against you. Your fetish or, whatever. Again, this goes on at Bohemian Grove. They got a necrophilia room. They've got an incest room. They got a pedophilia room. They've got you name it. They got it. And don't worry, they're catching you on film. Oh, man, it's so friggin' disgusting how this world works. But like I said, when you experience it firsthand, not, to that level, but I experienced enough to show me that, this is how it works. Been there, done that. So that experience really prepped me, without me realizing it at the time, but it prepped me for what I ultimately wound up doing in life, exposing this kind of crap. my training in college was training me for something else entirely different than what I had intended. You know, I was hoping at first to be a minister. Of course, that didn't pan out. Then, well, I'll be a history teacher. That didn't pan out either. You can't work in those fields with a conscience, guys. You can't. You just can't do it. You can't. You're paid to lie to people. So the training I got from my college was entirely something other than what I had intended, expected. But nevertheless, it was a good training. Nobody can tell me that that's not how these systems operate. Again, I've seen it firsthand. It is how they operate. You're told what to do, how to do it, when to do it, if to do it, who to do it with. You're told what to say, when to say it, how to say it. And you damn well better conform or you're out. That's it. You're done. You not only will lose your job, they'll destroy your reputation. They'll destroy you. Literally, if need be. Anyway, what do you know? That finished up the rest of the show there. So, yeah, I'll be off onto something different tomorrow, guys. Hopefully, maybe by next week, I'll be, booking some guests, maybe 1 or 2 a week. Get into a habit of that. It's good. It's nice to get guests on, get different perspectives. I used to enjoy that years ago. I haven't done it for a while. So, yeah, maybe I'll start getting into that as well. Even though I got millions of outlines that I want to get to on my, on my own. But anyway, so have a great day, guys, and we'll catch you tomorrow. Take care.